artificial intelligence will completely transform our world. But what is AI? Why will it affect you? And how can you and your business survive and thrive through the AI revolution? Welcome to AI and You. Here is your host, author, speaker, and futurist, Peter Scott.
Hey, we are up to episode 278. We are again focusing on AI in education. So many reasons for doing that I've talked about before. That's really where the rubber meets the road for nearly every issue in AI and where we need to get it right, because that's where we're training the generation that will save the world. You could be very pessimistic about that, but you can also be very optimistic about that. And one person who is optimistic is Becky Keene, an educator, author, and speaker focused on innovative teaching and learning, and author of the new book, AI Optimism, about all the good possibilities of AI in education. She specializes in instructional coaching, game-based learning, and integrating AI into education to empower students as creators, and speaks globally on AI in education. We're going to talk about the conflict between fear and hope about AI in education, changing our focus from product to process, how to reshape education to leverage AI, what role school leadership should play, and much more. Here we go. Becky Keene, thank you so much for joining me on AI and You. We're here to talk about your book, AI Optimism, and tell us what you're aiming to achieve in the field of education and its intersection with AI with this book.
One of the things I'm hoping to achieve is inspire, encourage, and motivate educators to move beyond a basic use of AI in education. The other thing I'm trying to achieve is help people understand that they don't have to be frozen by fear. They can use many of the tools available in safe and really impactful ways.
What is that fear? When you say that they're frozen by fear, what fears do you see in the teaching population?
Many. I see a fear of replacement. I see a fear of data privacy compromises. I see a fear of creating more inequity. And all of those are incredibly valid. They just shouldn't stop us from exploring the tools available and making good decisions based on what we know.
What are the sort of misunderstandings, misconceptions, incorrect metaphors, or comparisons that people draw that get in the way? Do you think, for instance, likening AI to the calculator is useful or obstructive?
I think it's useful, and especially 2.5 years ago when generative AI really exploded, we were trying to give people something to ground in. Recently, I've been expanding on those metaphors and using some other things in our world that I think help people relate to the use of AI in more ubiquitous ways or even more specialized ways. I realize those are two oppositional terms. But one example I've used just recently that seemed to be really helpful was talking about the field of media production. So obviously podcasts, movies, media of all sorts. We expect that people in those fields are using post-production tools. They often are working with an entire team of assistants and producers, directors, editors, colorists, all these fine details. The sound effects we see in movies are not the sounds that are happening on set, right, in the studio, let alone CGI and everything else happening in graphics. And in our world, we expect that. We don't question that someone has used a variety of tools to create a final product, some of which are automated and some of which are flat out fake, right? The sound effects, the graphics. So when we're looking at AI in a similar light, I hope we eventually get to a place as a society where we expect people to be using artificial intelligence support mechanisms to create a final work product that represents them and their voice and their goals without shaming or fear of attribution or dominance in a certain field.
That word product seems to be getting people into trouble in education when they look at AI, because we look at things like the workplace that you were referring to there, and employers care about product. They care about producing results. They do not care whether their employees learn or not, except insofar as that learning might help them create the next product faster and cheaper. Whereas education is about learning. We want that learning. The product, which is completing an assignment, some project of some form, is the way that we measure that. But it's the process that gets to that product that produces that learning. What sort of dynamics do you see here in the way people are interpreting or comparing products in education with products in the workplace?
It's a really great call out, Peter. And I appreciate you pointing that out, because my analogy absolutely doesn't hold true in every single capacity. I do think that we deserve as humans to shift our education practices a little bit. And that's, of course, a much bigger topic. But individual educators can focus on preparing students for their futures in some kind of career or industry, and balance that with the energy of helping them find their passion and what they value. And what we see often in education is that we have students who are simply checking off boxes, completing assignments they don't care about, that are scored by, in many cases, AI now. And so we have, in many cases, removed many of the human elements. We've removed that students should be passionate and care about what they're doing, because we've given them options and choice and empowered them to choose a field that they're really, truly interested in. This could get down a rabbit hole, but in many cases, we've removed many electives from our school systems and given them this singular college-bound track that does not fit most students, honestly. And so I do think AI is kind of stirring that pot and giving us an opportunity to reevaluate everything we've been doing. The issue, of course, is that individual educators who care very much about students and their growth as humans and their futures have very little power in a system that's already locked kids in to prepare them for the economy you described, where it's all about just generating content and wealth.
The tone of your book and how much you shared your personal experience from when you were a kid and you were afraid that your teacher would be angry at you for tracing a map of Africa to show where elephants lived. I love little touches like that. Tells me that I think there is emotional issues here that need to be resolved. And I think one of the core ones is you're talking there about the passion of students for learning and getting back to that. And every teacher resonates with that. Every parent likes the sound of that. And yet I think, are we not afraid that we're entering an era where if we trust those students with that ownership of their education, because we may not have any choice, given, as you say, that we can't reliably detect the use of AI in assignments, if we trust the students to be in that place of educating themselves, taking charge of their education with AI and all the opportunities and the ways of doing that, will that trust be borne out, or will there be students that take advantage of that and we lose them?
I think there will always be students who take advantage of the easy way out. I don't believe we can truly reach every single student with this love of learning, and it's not reasonable. Is it possible in a scenario where every kid has one-on-one guidance and a human really investing in them? Sure. But reasonably, no. We are still going to have students who check off boxes and just fill in the blanks and make sure that they've done what they can. I think that a revision in how we approach learning holistically, and maybe even releasing a little bit of control in our education systems, does take trust of the students. And that trust is not built through AI, it's built through human connection. So if we're able to allow educators time to really get to know our students and what they care about and what they need, then these other concerns will start to diminish. That's my opinion and hope.
And you put optimism right in the title. What are you optimistic about?
Oh, everything in general. It's interesting, I think, because the title came last. The entire book was done, written off to editing, had been in editing for quite some time. We'd done some rearranging, right? Concept development of the content. And my editor finally said, okay, you really need to come up with a title. What are you thinking? And those conversations around what am I really trying to say, it did kind of bubble up to the surface that I would like to think that I am an AI optimist, that I see possibilities more than I see problems, that I'm choosing to focus on potential because I believe that these are tools that can and will help all kids. Now, of course, there's skepticism and cynicism and pragmatism built in there, because if you look at my 3 core principles, we have to be really realistic about some of those challenges. But at the end of the day, that's not where I choose to live. I don't choose to end the conversation with fear and challenges. I choose to end the conversation with, but look what's possible and can we try it? And that's what I'm trying to help coach people through my book, through speaking engagements, through podcasts like this, through my blog. It's always pointing people in that direction. And I hope that resonates. It seems to have. I've gotten a lot of very positive feedback on the title.
So what are those 3 core principles?
So in the book, and that's how the book begins, is starting with praxis, privacy, and prompting. Praxis being our pedagogy, what we believe as educators about how we approach education, about how we approach students. First, having a self-reflection on what do I want students to know and be able to do? What do I want them to achieve? All of those types of questions that I think sometimes get lost in the busyness of being forced to teach a certain curriculum, being forced to use a certain tool. We have so much managerial action happening in education. Often educators don't get to choose. And that's unfortunate. But giving us an opportunity to slow down. What do I believe? Then making a determination on data privacy and how we're using these tools, what we're doing with them, what we're expecting them to do, how they're storing our data, what tools can we be using safely and securely. And then finally prompting, which I've heard mixed information on. Some people say, oh, we're not going to have to prompt anymore. Other people are still very much in the camp of prompting is powerful. And I am definitely in the prompting is powerful camp at this point. I believe wholeheartedly that the easy button tools that have come out in education are ruining so much of what we could be doing, because it's actually not giving teachers power, it's limiting them. And what I mean by that is when I log into, I'll call it an easy button tool, these tools that are set up to design for education, they're there to make teachers' lives simpler and faster at that substitution level. They are really focused on creating a lesson plan, creating a worksheet, creating a quiz, creating a presentation, all very teacher-centric, content-driven tools. And they are all following the same AI models and patterns with this back-end algorithm that app company has created to make teachers' lives simpler. And I am all for making teachers' lives simpler. But I've also seen these boring, for lack of a better word, more traditional, very basic outputs coming fairly consistently out of those tools. And the power of artificial intelligence and generative AI comes from really good prompting and asking for exactly what you need in a really personal, customized, deep dive sort of way. And that's where we're getting the full power of creativity in the model. So I'm saddened by the lack of emphasis on prompting being powerful. And I hope to bring some of that back, or at least an awareness.
What sort of things have you seen students do with AI? Have they used it in any ways that you've heard of being unusual, powerful, innovative?
I think we could go on for a while about that. Unfortunately, I think a lot of students are keeping their AI work very quiet. for a couple of reasons. One comes from the AI shaming that happens, where people instantly question, was this written with AI? Was this generated with AI? And our AI literacy is important. We need to be asking questions about news, about fake information, fact checking. That's important. But in some instances, we've let it spill over into creative tasks where kids are afraid to say, oh, I used code to help build this site. In fact, just as an example, I was helping score some student video games that they developed for a competition here in Washington State, a statewide finals competition just a few months ago. And some student groups were very vocal to the judges about not using AI. They were proud of it because they felt that that meant the work was all their own. Other students were proud of the fact that they had used AI appropriately to guide their work. For example, they might have commented that they had a bug in their code they couldn't figure out, and so they used an AI tool to help them debug. Now, I feel that's an incredibly appropriate and valuable use of AI because of what I believe about education and about people. And those students were able to then move past those hurdles with support and continue working on their task, where the students who didn't use AI often used more time troubleshooting and didn't then end up with maybe as fully built of a video game.
Right. So, but let me ask, why haven't the educators and the people running that environment made clear what the boundaries are, what the expectations are?
I agree with that. However, I also would like to see educators dig into conversations with those students to have them make those decisions. So instead of putting up, I call it the red light, green light chart, where we say like, you're not allowed or you are allowed. That goes back to the calculator conversation. We're, reducing AI to the calculator again. You can or you can't. And that's helpful. But it's helpful if our focus is teacher control. It's not helpful if our focus is preparing students to really think critically about how they're using the supports available to them. We don't think about using spell check. It's just a part of our world. And so how can we help students understand, here's what I'm trying to achieve, here's what AI can do to support that, and what am I trying to learn? Am I trying to learn this code, in which case I need to put forth the thinking of debugging? Or am I trying to do something else and this code is in the way, in which case I should just use a support system to help fix it, like I would go to another person or I would go to a YouTube tutorial. Same idea, I'm getting support so I can move forward with what I need. So that's something else I talk about in the book is the essential question, does this use of AI limit my learning? And giving students an opportunity to dig into that question and let it be messy at a developmentally appropriate level, where they can then make those determinations and not have to rely on someone else telling me how and when I can use AI appropriately.
As you say, so many places we could go with this, but our time is limited. I want to spend the rest of it looking at what you believe the next steps are for school leadership in creating the frameworks, guidelines, and principles that the teachers can operate within to streamline it, unify the ways in which this is happening, because it does seem that it looks like a every teacher for themselves kind of environment at the moment, and that is so wasteful and counterproductive. What would you like to see emerging from the leadership levels?
First of all, role modeling is something. So I've been working in adult professional learning for 20 years, and role modeling is always my number one request, that the school leader is doing the things they're talking about. So if a school leader is using AI, they should be talking about it and validating for their staff how they're using it and using it appropriately, and maybe even some of their thought processes around it, being really transparent and open about their challenges and their successes in that environment. Having staff conversations that are really open around people's concerns, especially in the area of equity, where we really don't know what we don't know yet as far as equity gaps and what's happening. We're seeing early evidence of problems where kids have had access to AI and then kids who haven't. But being open to those conversations and being available to have a challenge happen in your school system, a failure, giving permission to teachers to try new things and then learn together is incredibly important. I think many of our schools jumped to policies and frameworks. And what's difficult about so many of those policies is that they are outdated almost immediately and difficult to enforce often if we don't have an infrastructure in place and we really don't have a common understanding of what we're trying to achieve yet. Many of our schools and systems have been, in the US at least, have been waiting for state level guidance. I know worldwide it's more country or regional guidance. And unfortunately, I think that's a mistake as well, because in that hesitation comes more anxiety and confusion for students and families. So again, to go back to my original answer to your question, role modeling, having transparent conversations, and having an open mind, although they're not specific actions, I think are incredibly useful in building a school culture around acceptable AI.
Is it reasonable to expect school leadership to supply that direction in the absence, as you say, of leadership direction from the state or country level, which I would agree is not going to come in any time to be useful?
I don't think we need to expect our school leaders to be AI experts, similar to we don't expect them to be maths experts or science experts, right? They're an expert in guiding people, we would hope, and setting a vision. And so, yes, I do expect them to be diving into something that is an incredibly hot topic that is important to our schools and also our communities and also our world as a learner, the lead learner, maybe in the school. Yes, I think that's very appropriate.
Well, final question here then. What's next for you? What are you optimistic about achieving? Where do you want to take your work next?
Just this morning, I had an idea based on someone who messaged me on social media and said, have you ever thought about? So you're the first one to hear this. What if there was an AI Optimist student handbook? Because someone said, even though I give lots of student use examples in the book, they said, well, but the audience of the book is educators and school leaders. So could there be a book that the students are the audience? And so I'm mulling that over currently.
Wonderful. Really looking forward to hearing that. Hope to get you back again in the future, because this is, as you say, evolving so quickly that we could have a very different conversation less than a year from now about what's changed and what's coming down the road. So we will have links to your book and your site in the show notes and transcripts. But if you want to just say right now where people can get that for the ones who are listening, where should they go to?
Oh, absolutely. BeckyKeene.com is the perfect landing page. It has links to all my social platforms, and under books, you can access this along with the study guide, bulk order notes, all the things that go along with the book, and contact me as well. I do speaking. I have 4 keynotes in the next 2 weeks about AI, which is exciting. So yeah, we'd love to connect more with your listeners.
Terrific. Well, thank you very much, Becky Keene, for coming on AI and You.
Thanks, Peter, for having me. Have a great afternoon.
And that's the end of the interview. There's a link to Becky's website in the show notes and transcript. We're going to be talking a lot more about this, and especially in the context of a new organization I am part of founding. We're called KICL, the Center for AI in Canadian Learning. And we are working with currently K-12 schools in Canada to provide training in AI literacy for their teachers and students, and helping their leadership assess and improve their school's AI readiness. I'm really excited to be working with many talented and very passionate, innovative leaders in that space. And I'll have more for you about how that's going later. In today's news, ripped from the headlines about AI, librarians are being asked to find non-existent books hallucinated by AI. It must be galling to first be represented in the media as being rendered redundant by AI, and now becoming an unwitting instrument of its mistakes. 404 Media reported that, quote, reference librarian Eddie Kristen said lenders at the library where he works have been asking him to find books that don't exist without realizing they were hallucinated by AI ever since the release of GPT 3.5 in late 2022, end quote. But the problem escalated this summer when he was fielding patron requests for the same fake book titles from real authors. And this was traced to an AI-generated summer reading list circulated in special editions of the Chicago Sun-Times and the Philadelphia Inquirer earlier this year. The freelancer who wrote the article said he didn't fact-check the outputs before syndication. Alison Macrina, executive director of the Library Freedom Project, told 404 Media that librarians report being treated like robots over library reference chats. And patrons are getting defensive when the librarians point out the hallucinations they're passing on. Those people trust their AIs more than the human librarians. Of course, this is deplorable, but it's also likely to get worse before it gets better, as AI companies will simply see it as meaning that they should make the AIs more trustworthy, not helping to improve the interface people have with librarians. What should the role of librarians be in a world where machines can do so much of what we have used them for? That should be an opportunity, not a threat. An opportunity to find and define our humanity. This is coming up over and over in so many places and professions. Next week, my guest will be Professor Alison King, editor of the new book, Artificial Intelligence, Pedagogy and Academic Integrity. That's right, we're talking about AI and cheating on homework again, next week on AI and You. Until then, remember, no matter how much computers learn how to do, it's how we come together as humans that matters.
That's all for this episode of AI and You. Please leave a rating and comment and share with your friends. Get the book Artificial Intelligence and You and see more videos and articles at aiandyou.net. That's aiandyu.net, where you can also send us your questions. Thank you for listening.